From Los Angeles, the home of film and television, this is Film Music Live, a webcast featuring outstanding composers, orchestrators, filmmakers, and more from the world of music for film, television, and video games, talking about their work and answering your questions. Film Music Live is sponsored by the Film Music Network and Film Music Institute. And now the host of Film Music Live, Daniel Schweiger.
Hey everyone, I'm Daniel Schweiger, and welcome to Film Music Live, the show where you get to ask the questions to today's top composers. I'm happy to have you here. When people musically thought about Star Wars, they'd automatically hear the sumptuous, old-school, symphonically thematic scoring of John Williams, an approach that reinvigorated orchestral soundtracks in the theater near you. However, this template for just about every Star Wars big and small screen project since got a major shock to the system when Nicholas Britell created an utterly contemporary approach for the series Andor. Creator and co-writer Tony Gilroy significantly aging up an audience for a joltingly serious approach to George Lucas's kid-friendly mythos, particularly in its inventively unique scoring. Now, with Season 2, the main player is Brandon Roberts, who brings his own distinctive and suspensefully edgy approach to this prequel where the nascent rebellion strikes back. A protege of Marco Beltrami on such scores as Logan and Underwater, Roberts has been establishing his own stylistic scoring voice on Land of Bad, Motherland, and the joyous comedy horror slasher Thanksgiving, a genre he's just put a devilishly smiling spin on alongside composer Marcus Trumpp for Clown in a Cornfield. Now, as the final season of Andor reaches its climactic connection with Rogue One, Brandon Roberts captures both the excitement and seriousness of a new generation of Star Wars composers who have evolved a wonderfully familiar sound for a bold new musical galaxy where good and evil is far from Empire black and white. And now here to talk about joining the musical rebellion, all while terrorizing you with a killer clown, is Brandon Roberts. Welcome to Film Music Live.
Hi, thank you for having me. Thank you for that nice intro.
Oh, thanks. It's great having you, Brandon. Again, wow, what a second season so far. How did you come aboard Andor?
I think you could attribute it to one man, which is John Finkley. And he's the music editor for Andor Season 1 and Season 2, and he works with Nick Britell a lot. And when Nick had to depart, I get this cryptic text from him, and it just says, "Hey, what are you doing for the next 9 months? I can't tell you anything. Can't tell you how much. I can't tell you anything at all. Bye." So I responded with. I figured I was intrigued, obviously, but I responded with, I'm in with a question mark, and then slowly information started to be revealed. And I met with Tony Gilroy and John Gilroy. I met with Zana Wallenberg, the producer, and it kind of went up the chain and no one said no. And that was kind of how it went about. But I have a great debt of gratitude to a lot of people who took a big chance on me.
Wow. Now we've got our first question from Louis Versalini. Hey, Brandon, what were some of the challenges of taking over the score for Season 2 of Andor?
Right. Well, the biggest challenge is following in Nicholas Britell's footsteps. So I'm a huge fan of his work, as I'm sure most people are. And I loved what he did on Season 1. And I actually think it couldn't have been done any better palette wise. I mean, thematically, obviously too, but the palette he set up was so cool and such a great idea. And fortunately, I feel comfortable writing in kind of a hybrid style, with orchestra and electronics and synths. And so the biggest challenge was trying to pay homage to Season 1, because I'm a big stickler for continuity, as I'm sure most fans are. I didn't want it to feel like, no one wanted to feel like a totally different composer suddenly taking over. But then the whole thing had to morph. The music and the thematic material had to morph and change along with the characters and the story as it expands. And so Tony Gilroy was pretty clear. He's like, we need, new themes for new planets, for new characters. This is going to open up and needs to be developed. And so it was kind of a dance between finding that middle ground of retaining the DNA of the palette from season 1 and opening up for season 2 and contributing my own voice to it, but then finding a way to segue into Rogue One, whose palette is very different from the Andor season 1 palette. So in that case, we're trying to segue into a very traditional orchestra that Giacchino set up in Rogue One. So finding that handoff and that sleight of hand was probably the biggest challenge of the whole season.
Now, Dan would like to know, can you talk a little bit about your jazz guitar background and how that experience perhaps helped shape the harmonic choices in Andor in pieces like Host and Hostess and perhaps Gorman?
The jazz guitar background, it's a very good question. I don't know if it has dictated a lot of the writing, if that makes sense. It's become very helpful when it comes to playing. So when there's times that, if I need to play some guitar stuff, that was helpful. On some of the source music, I was doing some kind of odd nylon and guitar and Ron Rocco stuff, but I don't think it's conscious. I don't think there's a direct link, to be 100% honest. But what it does do, I think a jazz background allows for a lot of courage, let's say, in the writing process, and working with musicians, because you know what's possible on an improvisational level. So, to your question about specifically with the host and hostess cue, like we knew what we could get from the musicians in terms of what could be, slightly improvised, what could have more of a improvised feel to it, or feel a hint more jazz based. I had the language to talk to them about, obviously. Yeah.
Now, Dennis says that the first thing I noticed in Andor Season 2 is how well your scores dovetailed so seamlessly into the music, including the themes Nicholas Britell composed for Season 1. How did you manage to embellish and elevate what Nicholas did? It's spectacular.
Well, first, thank you. That's very kind of you. Well, I mean, I got teed up pretty well, man. I mean, like, when you have a cool theme and you're coming from his stuff, I mean, you're in good hands. So that helps, first and foremost. But the other thing is, I try to be very, very selective and judicious about when I used his thematic material. So it's very conscientious. It's not done all the time. It might be used in a heroic moment, or it might be used in a pensive moment, kind of tucked somewhere. But I tried not to just plaster the score with it for fan service, if that makes sense.
Right.
And so that helps, because I think when you don't overuse it, it can have a really great impact when it does come in. So that was a big part of it.
Yeah, it's interesting. The thing that I noticed is that, what Nicholas did for the first season is very super far out. Again, I had never heard any kind of Star Wars scoring like that. And it's almost kind of techno in its kind of weird way. And what you've done for Season 2 really seems to kind of be a blending of maybe more traditional approaches with this kind of weirder outlier Star Wars music.
Yeah, and a huge part of that's dictated by the story needs, right? So you could, like on Ferrix, let's go back to Season 1 for a second. On Ferrix, it kind of makes sense to have this very, I'm going to call it, industrial element to the score. I might have it absurd. I'm sure Nick has a different way of putting it, but and my feeling on it is it's orchestra mixed with this kind of industrial feel, and this, like you said, everything's kind of out. And in my case, if we just look at Season 2, we have Mina Rao, which is a totally different vibe, right? So it's a wheat planet, or at least what we see of it is wheat. And so that has a very earthy Americana vibe in the score. It wouldn't lend itself, in my opinion, it wouldn't lend itself as much to industrial electronic vibe. Whereas like on the jungles of Yavin, we are able to bring in kind of odd metals and found objects and everything, because it's a construction site, right? It's basically a giant construction site at that point, or it will be. So I think the planets, the settings, and dictate a lot of the musical palette when it comes to blending non-orchestral elements with orchestra, if that makes sense.
Now, I think for me, one of my favorite scoring moments straight out of the bat is the kind of almost 1950s, Miyazaki industrial scoring for the meeting where they decide, okay, here's our secret plans for Gorman. And it's almost this kind of nostalgic 1940s, it just out of nowhere. And it's pretty hilarious.
Yeah, and massive props to Max Karmazin, who did the arrangement on this thing. And it is we knew we had this vibe for Gorman that was going to be almost like a waltz, like a almost Viennesian waltz mixed with cymbalum and mixed with dulcimer, and so Tony Gilroy had talked about maybe doing it as like a like exactly what you said, like a reel-to-reel that you'd watch before, in the movie theater back in the day before the main feature shows. And it's basically a tourism film, 1940s tourism film for Gorman is kind of what it is. And so, yeah, we just had a blast with it. And the orchestra, oh my gosh, they killed it. Like I don't think when they turned the page and they opened it up, I don't think they were prepared. It's like, well, yeah, my grandfather used to play this type of stuff, but all right. And then they just brought it. It was so fun.
Now, the show's release is structured in a really interesting, and I don't think I've never really kind of seen it before, where basically you've got 3 hours a night, and obviously I have to binge it like immediately, where you have like essentially like a mini epic in 4 3-part sections. When you did this, were you aware of the kind of arc and fall of these? Because again, in the first season, everything would be building up to like the heist or something like that, and in here you have the kind of mini stories. Were you aware going right into that of the kind of structuring that your music was going to take?
Yes. Short answer is yes, and the reason is, and I'm assuming it's because it's such a VFX heavy show and it needs more time. The picture editing for all 12 episodes did not change much. And so before I had the initial meeting with Tony Gilroy and John Gilroy, they sent me all 12 episodes in some format, right? So they were, obviously some of the VFX were in their infancy, but in terms of the actual edit, and certainly in terms of the story arc, I got to see everything. And so I had a really good idea of where it was going to go for each of the 3 episodes, but then also for the entire season, and then also for both seasons. So I could kind of prep mentally and also discuss with Tony what his vision was for it. And that's incredibly rare in television, because normally you're working on scoring episode 1, and they're frantically editing episode 3. So you have no idea, you might have read some scripts maybe, or you might have a general idea, but you haven't seen footage. And that really seeing the footage and the pacing and everything dictates so much more than a script ever could. So I had the great benefit of, and massive moment of fear, because you see the whole thing at once and you go, oh God. But I had the great benefit of knowing all of those arcs in advance.
Right. Another really kind of strikingly interesting musical moment is at the ending of episode 3, when you have like Mon Mothma doing X to the Star Wars rave or something like that, and you're intercutting it with Cassian rescuing his friends on the Wheat Planet, and you build like a whole underscore out of this rave dance number as they keep cutting into Mon Mothma dancing around. What was the challenge of doing that? Of like, again, you have this kind of orchestral counterpoint on top of the Star Wars rave music.
Yeah, the end of 3 and then also the end of 6 do something very similar conceptually, where you're intercutting from source music back to score, and they're dovetailing. Sometimes they're overlapping, sometimes they're pre-lapping each other. And so this was in both cases, there was a lot of discussion between Tony, John Gilroy, and John Finkley and I about how we're going to make this work. And I think the legwork that John Gilroy and John Finkley had done in terms of tempo, like by basically keeping the tempo consistent and editing to a tempo, made the whole thing infinitely better. Because there's lots of times where someone might want you to intercut from scene to scene, and you're like, well, this would be great if you hadn't cut in the middle of a dotted eighth note like this. All of a sudden we're losing the rhythm. But in this case, they had done it so well that I was able, as long as I maintained a consistent tempo, we could pull it off and it would feel organic. But ironically, episode 6 was like the first thing I jumped in on. They said, "Oh, okay, well, great. Glad to have you aboard. We need you to do a 10-minute heist sequence that goes back and forth between 2 different planets, source music, and best of luck. Hope it goes well." So it was, it was by the time I jumped back to 3, it felt like we had the tools to do that. We had kind of cracked the code at that point.
Right. Now, Gorman, I literally kept expecting the picture to turn to black and white as everyone sings the resistance when the Nazis march into Rix. Tell me about, because again, these guys it's essentially Planet France. Tell me about the challenge of scoring that, this kind of aristocratic, elegant society, again, with, which is this giant metaphor.
Yeah. So again, the vibe, at least for the score, because there's a lot of elements to this. It's an excellent question, but it's going to take, bear with me. It'll take a second here. So the score aspect of Gorman, you have this kind of tip of the hat to the Viennese waltz. And then let's say musical identity is very flourishy, with the cymbalum and dulcimer being a huge part of it. But then we obviously we can talk about 208, but with the Gorman massacre and everything leading up to that, you now take the whole thing way down and have these almost seasick bendy elements that are in the score, that are supposed to lead into this horrific moment, obviously. And then after stuff happens and you have this aftermath of emotion, the score almost transitions into something I almost want to say requiem based, or at least elegy concept. And then you have this fourth element, which is the Gorman anthem, and Nick Britell, and that gets sung in the square. So Nick Britell and Tony Gilroy had written that before production even started, obviously on season 2, because it had to be sung on screen by all the extras and cast. So the new challenge was, okay, how can we integrate that while simultaneously having score, while simultaneously having all those sound effects? And so it really became a bit of a puzzle of trying to see how it all could fit. But there's one moment, like the way 208 starts, for example, obviously every main title gets rearranged to be, a new main title. But I actually have the Gorman theme being sung by a soprano while it's being juxtaposed by the main Andor theme sung by a chorus of women. And then this like kind of dissonant thing going on with the strings to kind of prelude what's going to happen by the end of episode 208. So it's a long way of saying that Gorman, I think for everybody involved, production, obviously VFX, the cast, was just a mammoth undertaking of both setup leading into it, and then 208 being the big explosion. So, but the music had a lot of work to do for all of that.
Yeah, I mean, I just obviously a lot like episode 9 and Mon Mothma's big speech and Escape is just essentially this really probably my favorite scoring in the entire series so far.
It was very fun, very fun.
Yeah, I mean, what's it like again? You've got to score like this gigantic, iconic speech, and the escape sequence just kind of getting that, and it's a fairly brief speech before she gets shut down.
Well, that's like Nick DNA, like through and through. And then for the escape, we went almost John Powell Born Identity. I mean, if you really listen to the whole thing, it becomes very espionage, and it's a massive departure from kind of a lot of the other vibe. Obviously, it uses thematic material, etc. But that's consistent. But we wanted to make that thing feel a little different from what you just came from 208. And it's one of the few episodes in the whole season 2 that really dives into the espionage aspect. And I, just as a fan, I'd always wondered, like, how does Mon Mothma wind up? Like, how does her life change from where it was to where we know her from in the original trilogy? And so it was so interesting to see, to have that episode be basically answer that question for us. But yeah, it was intense. Like, and also coming off 208, you think, all right, we're gonna have a nice a filler episode maybe. Nope, that didn't happen. It's like, no, now you're on the 209. Best of luck. So
So I'm going to be jumping between Coruscant and Middle America, which is blood soaked. And I've got a question from Radislaw. Hello, Brandon. Can you say something about the making of the score for Thanksgiving? I am a fan of the score. I brought it a few days ago on vinyl. Will it return as a sequel and you as a composer?
Well, hi, by the way. Thanks for buying the vinyl. I appreciate it. And yeah, it's pretty cool to have that thing in your hand, man. As regarding Thanksgiving 2, what limited knowledge I do have is it's supposed to happen. And I mean, I never trust anything until contracts are signed and stuff, but hopefully I'm doing the music for it. We'll see. But that movie was an absolute blast to work on. And Eli Roth I cannot say enough kind things about him. This guy loves movies. He's a walking movie encyclopedia, and he loves movie scores. So working with him is, you can only imagine. I mean, he literally turns into like an excited schoolboy when a scene comes to life with music. So but no, we had a blast. And I mean, I can't believe some of the stuff he put on screen and got away with, but it sure was fun to score it.
Yeah, I just love the opening of that. The mass hole opening of that film,
Yeah.
with the storming of the Black Friday. Tell me about scoring that sequence in particular.
Well, that was like it's played so over the top. So we wound up titling it Red Thursday instead of Black Friday, because it's technically, I think it's they had it on Thursday night. So yeah, the idea was you cannot go too over the top for this thing. Like, it's got to be absolutely ridiculous. And one of Eli's notes, I remember, he goes, hey, I want like when the guy is struggling, like he's got the neck wound, but he's struggling for that, like I can't remember if it was a bread maker or whatever. He's like, I want it to be like this tragic thing. I want it to go heroic when he rescues. Like, I mean, we really played it up like it was this epic struggle, but going through every emotion that there is. But in reality, it's literally just a bunch of people trying to get TVs and bread makers.
Now this leads us to the other Eli Craig, who made the brilliant Tucker and Dale versus Evil. Now you scored with Marcus Trumpp for Clown in a Cornfield, which is another retro slasher movie with probably a bunch of sequels that'll be coming after it. Tell me about embodying clowns are the thing. How did you want to embody a killer clown?
Well, okay, first, I mean, you guys got to understand, Marcus Trumpp and I are like best friends going back to college, and he's how I got involved with Marco Beltrami. Just imagine your best friend, but then someone saying, "Hey, you guys want to score something together?" So that's what this got to be, and it was an absolute blast. And we had worked together with Eli Craig, with Marco on Little Evil several years ago, and then Eli, out of the blue, he's like, "Hey, what do you think about this?" And so Marcus and I wound up doing it together. And after talking to Eli, he said, "I don't know. What do you guys think? Do you think we just need I don't know if I really want to do just a wind up box with like a stereotypical melody." And so we all kind of thought at the same time, well, what if we make the melody of the wind up box that is the linchpin for the entire score, like nail that, and then have that be the main theme of the score, have that be the main, let's say, motif, throughout. It can show up in basses, it can show up as, demented versions, whatever. And that was kind of the approach that we took. So we nailed the music box first, and then just extrapolated into the score. But the movie's in the same way Thanksgiving, it's so over the top and self-aware of what it's doing that it's almost like you can't go too far. And those type of movies are so fun to do, because you're, as long as the energy is there, everyone's down. They're just laughing or having fun. But here's the coolest thing. I don't know if this is true, but I have heard that they made like actual music boxes of the thing with the theme. And if that's the case, I definitely want one. And I hope they'll monetize them and start selling them. But I thought that was so cool, like from a promotional standpoint. Hopefully those will rear their heads, literally. So
what's funny again, Marco, who really kind of, with Wes Craven, put the kind of modern retro slasher back on the map with Scream. You're in a way picking up that hat, the ghost face mask here, with Thanksgiving and Clown, because they both have very strong, retro elements or a retro tone to them. How do you want to, again, kind of capture the black humor of this? But again, there has to be actual menace.
Yeah, ironically, I guess it goes back to Elmer Bernstein and Airplane, which is play it straight and it's going to be funny. And so I think that rule, I mean, obviously, I'm sure people have been doing that years before that, but conceptually, I think if you play something earnestly and then you clear for some of the comedy, and this is a lesson that I learned after trying it many other ways early on. A lot of times the best approach is just get out of the way of the comedic moments, just drop the music out and let those land. But play the menace and the characters' emotions absolutely straight, as if it's the most dramatic thing that's ever happened. And for them it is. And somehow you wind up landing in the spot where it's so funny, because it's like, for example, the girls trying to use the rotary phone, which we play it straight as if this is, oh my God. I mean, this is the most dire situation that's ever occurred. And so that seems to kind of walk the blade on, or the tightrope of comedy and terror.
Yeah, no, it's just hysterical. And, one thing that really kind of, the movie is all fun and great, but then there is a big leveling up when there's more than one clown in the cornfield. It's a spoiler,
yeah.
I know, but the movie's opened already. So how did you want to play that revelation that there's something much bigger going on here than just a psycho?
Well, Marcus had written this cue. that, I mean, it's literally like, it's like death. It's like a death metal cue. And we laughed so hard when he came with it, and he's got like the cello bass. It's like, and I think that set the tone too for all of that, to play up that whole sequence as just being insane. And yeah. And so the idea was, when they come out of the cornfield, it had to just be as epic as possible. So first was like a big statement of some of the thematic material, and then it was full on heavy metal horror, vibe, pretty much almost until the end of the film.
Right, and what's interesting about the modus operandi between the killer in Thanksgiving and the killers in Clown in the Cornfield is that they're out to punish kids, those darn kids,
Yeah.
those Gen Zers. How did you want to kind of capture that kind of element? All of these slashers, there's some method of vengeance or revenge or making things right in their warped minds, but here there's kind of a bigger issue of keeping people in their place, literally.
Yeah, it's so funny. I just had never, when we were working on it, I didn't honestly think about that theme as much. And when I say theme, I mean that theme that is such a prevalent part of the story. And so I don't, other than trying to portray the town as in its twilight, right? Like it's a town in decline. I don't know if there was any conscious effort to try to communicate, let's say, the generational conflict, other than scoring the town as kind of something in decline. But then what's interesting is once the movie came out, you started seeing all these reviews talking about that. I'm like, and I felt like an idiot because I was like, oh, of course, this is a huge part of it. Not that musically would have done anything differently, but it was interesting to see how much people responded to that, that situation between the two generations.
Now, Dale wants to know, what is that crazy looking instrument behind you, and did you use it in Clown in a Cornfield?
Dale, it's so funny you should ask. That is a guitar viol, and I honestly can't remember if I used it in Clown in a Cornfield. I honestly can't remember. If I did, I'm sure it's tucked in. It's like tucked in there in some of the tense moments. The funny thing is it's found its way into so many scores right now. They've all blended into one. So I don't remember.
Now, jumping back to Coruscant and Andor, and again, please forgive me if I can't remember the characters' names, but I just love that slow motion shot in episode 8, where this Empire dude, the mama's boy,
Cyril
suddenly realizes what is going on. I'm bummed to see him go. Hopefully the Emperor's cloned him somewhere. But how did you want to play this? Is this kind of coming to a realization of what and also for his Ilsa She-Wolf of the SS, of these stormtroopers, what they've come to you, because you've never ever in any of the Star Wars anything seen regret from the Empire, and here you do.
Yeah. So I would argue that is the first moment of, let's say, release in all of 208. Because everything leading up to that is tension and horror. And right before that actually is the sequence in which the KX droids come out, and literally it's almost like horror music and using like, dropping massive chains on trash cans and all this kind of stuff. And then all of a sudden, after seeing of what those droids are capable of doing, there's just this moment of suspension, right? I don't mean suspense, but like where all of a sudden the musical ground has been pulled out from under the score, and it goes into something, let's say, poetically beautiful / stereotypically poetically beautiful. That is a moment to just finally, after 40 minutes of tension, to reflect on what is actually happening, as opposed to just digesting the horror of it all. And so that was what that moment was supposed to be, not just a realization for the character, but also a moment for all of us to take in what is actually happening. And then ironically, you only get that for, I think, 40 seconds. And then we dive right back into that explosion. and then the fight, obviously, between Cyril and Cassian. So that moment, although it's 40 seconds, is visually, editorially, and then musically supposed to hit you hard, and is a massive moment for the character and the series, obviously.
How did you see again? Forget his girlfriend,
Dedra.
Dedra.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
how did again? She's kind of she's Cassian's girlfriend.
Oh wait, no, she's Cyril's girlfriend.
Cyril's girlfriend. My
apologies.
Yeah. How did you see her character? Because again, it's this kind of really dysfunctional relationship, especially with the mom from hell that
Totally.
the Jewish mom. I'm Jewish, so I can say this. But how did you see her character? I mean, and again, playing real humanity, because you just like these. God help me, I really like these two characters, and I'm hoping to somehow get away from this.
Yeah, I know. I felt the same way, and I get just as shocked seeing it all as all of you guys. I just had that shock a long time ago when I saw it, but I see her a bit as unfortunately she's in too far in her mind to pull back. So I see her as just a tragic character, and their relationship as a tragic, having basically a tragic relationship, so to speak. But before all that goes down, I love watching the two of them, because it's so oddly dysfunctional. There's like some S&M stuff going on. I mean, it's wild. Like, I mean, like you could do a spin-off of just the two of them, like, on Coruscant, and they're, whatever. So so scoring them was great, but it was very sad to see what happens in 208 and then where it devolves to. And ironically, like the scene where, their last scene together, I really tried to scale back because their performances are so good that we found less is more. I mean, it's very subtle. And then just tried to end it with that like stopped piano vibe for Cyril and their relationship. But it was also tour de force performances by two actors, just an amazing writing.
Yeah, they're great. I just want to see you do a prequel honeymooners thing.
Oh, totally.
On Coruscant. Let's just
make you it happen. You can even do like a reality show, like they're like a like the real Imperials of Coruscant, season 4. It would be amazing.
So I've got a question from Star Dawn here. I've been eagerly anticipating each of the Andor soundtrack drops. How did your work overlap with the development of the Gorman language for the anthem, especially?
Okay, so regarding the Gorman language, that was written in pre-production for season 2. Let's see, when Nick and Tony wrote the Gorman anthem, they then had it translated by a translator into Gore, and then it was rehearsed, as I understand it. I wasn't there for this, but as I understand it, it was rehearsed with the obviously with the extras and cast that needed to sing it. Now flash forward to me and my contribution. So we have there's a Gorman aria that Tony wrote the libretto for, and that got translated by the linguist into the Gore language, and then sung in London by a soprano, like literally learning. She had to learn the Gorman language and sing the thing, and then it rears its head again in the end credits of 208. There's this this piece where I rearranged the Gorman anthem for basically like a solo soprano and then a women's choir, and almost as a reflection on what just occurred in 208. So it then gets quoted in various other parts. Like the main title of 209 starts with the Andor theme, and then you'll hear almost like echoes of the Gorman anthem chanting. It's like, and it's been verbed out and everything. So it was no joke using they took using the language very seriously, and they had a linguist rehearsing with the female choir and the soloists before our recording sessions. It was like we had legit translations, syllable by syllable, and it's lore accurate for sure, man. There was no joking around.
Wow. Now I've got a question from Connor Williams. The quote doom bends for the massacre that Tony coined, how did that come up in the compositional process?
Right. So we knew that 208 was going to be a giant build, basically a 30-minute build, let's say. I'm estimating the time. And we knew through discussions with Tony and John Finkley and everything that we wanted the whole thing to have this feeling of unease. And so we thought, well, what if we do it with these things pitching in and out of tune? And so we sent Tony a bunch of different versions of the bends in different ranges and different intervals, and just kind of to see how he'd respond, like which ones he responded to. And it was interesting because he had really strong thoughts on it. And he said, I really like this, but I don't think we need the extra note. And so we said, okay, cool. So that was first, it was nailing the intervals and the bends and the ranges that seemed to work the best. And then it was about incorporating them into the score for the actual scenes. And ironically, it all kind of gets higher and higher and higher and throughout that 30 minutes. You'll start to hear them get higher in range. And sometimes they're bending in other directions too simultaneously. But the idea was to make the listener a little bit seasick over the course of this impending tragedy that is inevitable.
So do you think it's a good thing or a bad thing scoring a show like this and being a mega Star Wars fan?
That's an excellent question, Daniel. Okay, I'm going to say this. At the beginning, it's terrible. And the reason is because I know enough John Williams to know how far away from John Williams I am, if that makes sense. It's like, to put it in movie terms, it must be like the Salieri feeling to Mozart, you know? So you can love something, but also realize I can't even touch that. I can't even touch it. I know too much to know that I even could pretend that I can touch that. So I so that's the bad part of being a huge Star Wars fan. But then the good part is when you say, okay, what can I bring to it? What can I bring to it? That's different, that works for this, that Tony likes, that everyone likes, and that is appropriate, but but is paying honor to the vibe of Andor and paying homage to Nicholas's score. And once you put that aside and just start doing the work and doing it the way you bringing out your own expression, then all of a sudden being a huge Star Wars fan is a massive asset, because I know so much of the lore and so much of the music that I feel like I have enough knowledge to make very informed decisions on the music. Even if it's different, I still feel like I know what I'm doing from a story standpoint. And that's huge because it's easy to take for granted being older and realizing, wow, I actually do know quite a bit about the OT, like, and the sequel and the prequels. I mean, some of the sequel stuff, but I mean, mainly the prequels and the OT I know back and forth.
So, I mean, this allegedly comes to an end tomorrow night. We're doing this on Monday. What do you want people to take away, from what you've done? There's obviously going to be the handoff to Rogue One. I mean, what other aspects of the Star Wars universe do you want to explore? Like, it may be more childish or kid friendly, or maybe more adult friendly.
Okay, so it's Daniel, that was a great question. All right, I want, this is what I want. I heard rumors there's supposed to be and again, I have no idea. I heard rumors there's supposed to be a Star Wars horror project. If that happens, I would love to do that, because that would be the melding of two elements that have been a huge part of my life, but also my professional career. I think that would be so cool. But in all honesty, I'm grateful to have contributed in some small way to this, and been a part of, I came in late to the party on Tony's big, accomplishment, and I was just glad that everyone was happy and I could contribute something to it.
So what is up ahead for you otherwise?
So I have in summer, they're going to be releasing a film theatrically I did called Forgive Us All, and it's like a post-apocalyptic Western that was shot in New Zealand that I'm really proud of. It was a really wonderful film to score, and I love Westerns, and I've been wanting to score Western for a long time, or has Western elements. And so that was a lot of fun. And I think that's coming in the theaters in this summer, like July-ish or something, but I'm not 100% sure when yet. But yeah, so that's coming up. And then a couple of things simmering on the burner that I don't know yet. We'll see how they pan out.
Well, Brandon, I want to thank you so much for joining us at Film Music Live. Watch all the seasons of Andor as of tomorrow on Disney Plus, with Brandon's season 2 scores available on Walt Disney Records, with episodes 10 through 12 out this Friday. And see Clown in a Cornfield in theaters with its soundtrack on Waxwork. Big thanks to Sam DeFrank at Costa Communications, Holly Battaglia at Walt Disney Records, our show producer Dale Turner, and graphic designer Mark Banning. And I'll be seeing you on the next Film Music Live.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you.